Okay, so this is going to be a full card prediction video for the Ring 3 card that's on the 12th of July. Of course, headlining that card is Shakur Stevenson v William Zepeda. Then in the co-main, you've got Matias v Puello. And of course, on that card, you've got Morrell v Khataev as well. Now, I've made videos about the Shakur fight and the Morrell fight. I haven't talked about the Puello and Matias fight, but I'm going to talk about all three fights on this card and give a quick prediction, what I think is going to happen, a bit of info I have on each guy if I have it, and what I think is going to happen in this card. So first of all, we're going to kick it off with a fight I've actually talked about before, David Morrell versus Imam Khataev. Now, both guys are really high level boxers in my opinion. Khataev probably not as high level as a guy like Morrell. I think Morrell's a far better boxer puncher, but Khataev has got body mechanics and boxing fundamentals that are quite high level in my opinion, and he packs a punch. Above all, I mean, not to say that David Morrell doesn't. You know, David Morrell's 11-1 with 9 knockouts, and Khataev is 10-0 with 9 knockouts. You know, both guys pack a punch. This is a 10-rounder from what I can see, which makes sense. It doesn't have to be a 12-rounder if there's no world title on the line. But of course, David Morrell's coming off his most recent and only loss, which was against David Benavidez. And in that fight, it wasn't necessarily a bad performance. I think over the course of the 12 rounds, David Benavidez was able to get to David Morrell quite often. And once Benavidez is sort of in his groove, he's able to be physical. He's able to throw a lot of punches and, you know, use that high punch output at these heavyweight divisions, which is very rare, to sort of steamroll his opponents, right? And David Morrell was in there. He stayed in the fight for a very long time. The start of the fight was very competitive, and Morrell wasn't given an inch. But I think as the fight started to go on, as you got into the midway of the fight, later in the fight, Benavidez was getting to him a bit more. That being said, Khataev and Benavidez's style aren't similar, right? They aren't really similar. Whereas Khataev's a lot more of a power puncher, a lot more of a single puncher. Not to say that Khataev doesn't throw combinations. He definitely does. He definitely throws combinations to set up that big punch that will stop you, right? But David Morrell is similar in that sense where he'll do it in a different way though. I think Khataev does it with pressure and his physicality. David Morrell is able to be a bit more of a boxer puncher, move around a bit and walk a guy onto something devastating. And I actually think that's how David Morrell is probably going to win this fight. By getting Khataev, even if Morrell maybe loses a couple early rounds, I think he's going to not try and lose a round, but accept that that's going to happen in effort to come the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round. He's going to find those openings in Khataev and maybe walk him onto something and potentially even stop him. Like I said, both guys are punchers. Khataev, punch for punch, probably is more devastating. But that being said, they've both got 9 knockouts. They both can clearly punch. Like David Morrell will put a guy out. And I think he'll stop Khataev in this fight. And then following that fight, if Morrell's able to win that fight, then World Championship fight again. Or maybe like Callum Smith. Or even an Anthony Yarde. If Anthony Yarde loses to Benavidez, and Anthony Yarde, that's a big fight. There's options there. There's always going to be options for the winner, right? Then we move on to the Dominican Republic's Puello, who fights Subriel Matias at 147, I believe. Or 140 even. 140 it is. Yeah, both junior welterweights. Yeah, I mean, these guys are two pretty high-level boxers in my opinion. I think Matias, of course, 22-2 with 22 knockouts is a nuts record. And he's quickly becoming one of my favourite boxers to watch. Got an interesting style, a pressure fighter, and he can clearly punch. Of course he can punch. You know, if you're 22 wins, 22 knockouts, you can clearly punch, right? And actually, even considering Matias has lost twice before, Puello hasn't lost, but in my opinion, I think Puello's more beatable than Matias, right? Of course, Puello will be the favourite in this fight. He's coming off wins against Gary Antoine Russell, who was undefeated in his own right. 17 wins, 17 knockouts going into that fight for Gary Antoine Russell. But Gary Antoine Russell and the other guy that he beat recently, I forget his name, both guys were able to get to him. They were able to put pressure on him, at times pin him against the ropes, pin him in the corner, even in the open ring, and sort of unload on him. Put together combinations of 2, 3, 4, 5 punches, and I'm thinking, if these guys are doing that to you, if Subriel Matias does that to you, you might not stick around for too long. You might not make the distance. You might not go all 12 rounds if Matias is throwing those punches to you, right? Both guys have been fighting at the world level. I think Matias is a former champion, I believe. Let me double check. I believe Matias is a former champion. Obviously, Puello is a champion in his own right as well. He'll be making his second defense of his WBC junior welterweight title. And so Matias is a former world champion. There you go. These guys are both guys that are pretty established at world level. Matias, I think, is the older of the two. They've got about similar sort of experience. They both have 24 fights. Only difference is Matias has got 2 losses, but all of his wins are by knockout. Right, so that's always going to give you an edge. It's always going to make you dangerous. And being said, in terms of technical boxing, I don't think there's a huge difference between the two in terms of skill gap. I think they're quite similar. And you've got Matias, who's the bigger puncher as well. So I might even pick the underdog Subriel Matias to win this fight. Yeah, that's going to be my pick. He's coming off a loss as well. Lost to Liam Paro. But hey, Matias, he's a hell of a boxer, man. He's a serious puncher. And like I said, if you're in a fight, you being a serious boxer, a serious puncher, that's always going to give you a chance. You're always going to have literally a puncher's chance, right? And no, he's not coming off a loss against Liam Paro. He's actually won 2 times since then. Going with Matias to win that fight. And actually become the new WBC junior welterweight champion. Oh, and there was another fight I didn't mention. Of course, you've got Berlanga v Sheeraz on this card as well. But we won't talk about them next. We'll talk about Zepeda versus Shakur Stevenson next. Of course, this is for the WBC lightweight title. Both guys are undefeated. Shakur Stevenson, fundamentally defensive, amazing boxer. Amazing boxing fundamentals. If I was training a 15-year-old that had never boxed before, he comes into the gym, I'd be showing him Shakur Stevenson tapes. This is boxing 101. For modern boxing, for how the game is in 2025, this is boxing 101, in my opinion. He's got his hands up, his footwork is fundamentally good, his jab is good, he sets up his punches, he's not a huge puncher, he doesn't rely on huge power. I think Shakur Stevenson's actually got a bit of power there. I think he's got a bit of sting behind his shot. I think everyone's sort of assuming he's got like pillow hands. I think a guy like Devin Haney's got pillow hands. I think Shakur Stevenson's, he's sneaky with it. And it's the sort of power that may not destroy you in round 1. But come round 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you're going to start to feel it. And it may not even stop you, but it's going to take, over the rounds, it's going to take 5% out of you. And if that power takes 5% out of you from round 4 to round 9, do you know what I mean? How many rounds is that? That's 5 rounds. It's taken 5. That's diminished you about 50%. I don't know if that math checks out, but I don't know. That math doesn't check out. But whatever, you know what I'm saying. Shakur's got a sneaky power. Zepeda's got a very obvious style of power, right? Where he'll walk you down, apply pressure, throw loads of combinations, break you down, land clean on you, and then most guys throughout his career he's been able to stop. Couldn't stop Tevin Farmer. Fought Tevin Farmer for 22 rounds and couldn't stop him, and arguably lost. Arguably could have lost both fights. There's people with that school of thought that Zepeda could have lost both fights to Tevin Farmer. I think Tevin Farmer definitely won one of those fights. Take your pick in terms of what you think the first or the second fight. But I think Tevin Farmer won one of those fights for sure. Right? And you have to think about it. Of course, Tevin Farmer's got a unique style. No one else in boxing really fights like Tevin Farmer, maybe Caleb Plant, but it's different. It's different. No one fights like Tevin Farmer, so you can't be like, oh, well, you couldn't stop Tevin Farmer, you can't stop Shakur. They don't fight the same. They don't fight the same. Although I could see the fights going similarly, where it's going to be a battle of Zepeda's volume versus Shakur's efficiency. And even though Tevin Farmer's known for having a pretty good gas tank, even Zepeda could wear him down. So Shakur's never really shown to get tired in any of his fights, really get exhausted. But again, he's never fought Zepeda. He's never fought someone like Zepeda who, I think I saw somewhere he throws 200 punches around. That's insane. That can't be right. But if he's throwing 200 punches around, that in and of itself makes him hard to beat. Because he can win just off volume. Which is basically what he done against Tevin Farmer, those two fights. He basically won of those fights off volume. Because he didn't outbox him, really. Tevin Farmer was slipping, and he did kind of outbox him. Eventually, he was able to outbox him. Eventually, he was able to get to him and apply pressure and put him against the ropes, put him in bad positions, rip the body. He's able to do these things eventually, right? Can he do those things eventually to Shakur? Potentially. But then again, Shakur defensively has far better footwork than a Tevin Farmer. Yes, Tevin Farmer's got good upper body movement, good head movement, good use of his hips to duck, and good use of his shoulders and his head to roll shots. But Shakur is fundamentally probably a better boxer. In terms of lateral movement and timing and setups, Shakur is the better boxer. Better than Zepeda and better than Tevin Farmer. Of course, this is Shakur's third weight division. Started at 126, won a world title, was champion at 130 and is now champion at 135. I've been a fan of Shakur for so long. It's going to be hard to pick against him. It always will be. But what can you do? Okay, so I was briefly interrupted there. But like I was saying, it's hard to bet against Shakur Stevenson. I'm going to be going with Shakur Stevenson to win that fight against William Zepeda via decision to retain his WBC World Lightweight title. And then we go on to the main event, which is Hamzah Sheeraz versus Edgar Berlanga at super middleweight. Of course, this is Hamzah Sheeraz's first fight at super middleweight. He's an undefeated champion at lightweight. And obviously in his last fight was gifted a draw against Carlos Adames. He didn't deserve the draw, certainly didn't deserve a win, and didn't deserve a draw either. He should be very happy that he managed to get a draw in that fight. But some people are saying, the weight cut, or he came into the fight with an injury or got injured early on in the fight. Whatever. It wasn't a good performance at all. And to be honest, it's part of the reason why I've sort of been not talking about this fight that much, because that performance did really leave a sour taste in my mouth. I'm like, Carlos Adames got absolutely robbed there. Well, he got robbed. But that being said, it's a new fight. It's a new weight division for Hamzah Sheeraz. Of course, Edgar Berlanga is the career super middleweight. He's established at the weight division. He's clearly got power for the weight division. He's got a ton of stoppages. That being said, I couldn't name a single person he stopped. And the only person I know that he fought was Canelo, and he lost. So there is something to be said for that. And in the nature he lost as well, it was pretty convincing. And Canelo never really had to get into third or fourth or fifth gear. He never really had to get into third or fourth gear. He was able to drop him early and then win that fight, Canelo. He was able to outbox him. Sheeraz and Canelo, they aren't the same boxers. Canelo's a far better boxer, and the styles are completely different as well. Hamzah Sheeraz is a lot taller, a lot lengthier, and boxes like a tall fighter. That being said, boxer for boxer, Hamzah Sheeraz is the far better technical boxer than Edgar Berlanga. Edgar Berlanga, punch for punch, is the more powerful puncher. He's shown that in his resume, as well as generally being the bigger guy as well. Hamzah Sheeraz fought at 154 at one point. That being said, I'm going to go with Hamzah Sheeraz to win this fight. I think Hamzah Sheeraz probably wins another decision. I don't see him stopping Edgar Berlanga. You've got Canelo, who was a light heavyweight, who stopped Kovalev, and he couldn't stop Berlanga. So I doubt Hamzah Sheeraz is going to stop him. But I think Berlanga's going to have a lot of trouble in this fight. I think Sheeraz, if he's able to stick to his game plan and stay on the outside and remain tall and use that reach, the way he has early on in his career. I mean, that fight against Adames, like I said, it really left a sour taste in my mouth. But are you going to judge the guy off his last performance, or are you going to judge him off, the majority of his career? Right? And as much as that last performance, there is something to be said for that. to be honest, the same paths to victory for Adames are kind of there for Berlanga, where you're not going to be able to, win this fight on the outside. You're going to have to get inside. You're going to have to make it ugly. But Adames is a better technical boxer than Berlanga. In terms of, I think Adames puts his punches together better. He's smaller. And Berlanga is a bigger guy. There's pros and cons to this. But overall, I think Hamzah Sheeraz is going to win the fight. I think it's going to be another decision win. I think the main and the co-main, they're probably going to be decision wins. And, Hamzah Sheeraz is going to win that fight. And then, I don't know who the other world champions are at super middleweight off the top of my head, but Hamzah Sheeraz will be looking at a world title fight after that, I'd imagine. Well, of course, you've got Canelo, but Canelo's fighting Crawford, so he's sort of tied up. You've got your Charlos, your Resendises, your Plants at the top of the division. So, those are interesting fights for sure. Those are really interesting fights. So, we'll see what's next for each, guys, and no doubt I'll do a fallout video after this card, because it looks like a really good card and some really good fights, and I've talked about all of them. So yeah, another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest in the bag, and I'm out. Peace.